The country has now looked up and said, let me get this straight. We're at 10.2% unemployment going up. The larger unemployment number is 17.5 if you count people who've quit looking and people who are marginally employed. In California, my guess is your larger unemployment number is 20, every fifth person. The Chinese have $2 trillion in debt, and Obama wants to spend rapidly enough that they'll have $4 trillion by the end of 8 years. We have no national energy policy, so we rely on bowing to a Saudi king to get energy and hugging a Venezuelan dictator. We have a foreign policy of total weakness. We have an attorney general who believes in protecting terrorists rather than Americans. We have a system so confused that the chief of staff of the Army thought one of the greatest casualties at Fort Hood could be diversity. I thought the greatest casualties at Fort Hood were Americans who lost their lives in a war serving their country being attacked by a terrorist. I don't think it's confusing. And the message I want to bring to you today is, this is a moment to quit worrying about them. We know who they are. We know how bad they are. We know how much damage they would like to do. This is the moment to figure out what the replacement is. And I want to argue that the purpose of 2010 and 2012 should be very straightforward. That this should be the greatest replacement campaign probably since Andrew Jackson in 1828. And it should be designed as a replacement campaign. And we should be very clear from day one. We're not interested in reforming the left. We're not interested in compromising with the left. We're not interested in understanding the left. We are interested in replacing the left. Now, having helped design three relatively successful campaigns, 1980, 1988, when we were behind, remember, George H.W. Bush was behind Dukakis by 19 points in May. And we decided the only way to win was make it a values campaign, not a personality campaign. And we switched actually 27% of the country between May and November. And then 1994, which had the largest one-party increase in turnout in American history. 9 million additional voters because of a conscious and disciplined, and Ed will remember because he was there and he was part of it. It was a disciplined, direct, systematic campaign that was designed to send a positive message to the Perot voters to get them to turn out. So what is our message? I believe our message has to be, among ourselves internally, that we have an opportunity of such enormous proportions that we have to go out, I believe, and undertake three steps, and only three. First, we have to design an argument so large that when we win it, we crush the left. I am totally opposed to base mobilization, narrow focus campaigns. I believe you want to set up fights where you're at 80 or 90% and they're at 10 or 12%, and you want to just break them. And you want to do it so that when the media is done lying about you and your own team, which will be relatively amateurish and relatively confused, is done being confused, you still are ahead by 65-35. That's a very, go back and look at the contract. Every item in the contract was 70% or better. Why? Because we wanted candidates who'd never run before to be on local talk radio saying things cleverly like, I am for welfare reform. That was a 92% issue. So the person driving down the road goes, oh good, I am too. And then we want them to memorize key phrases like, I think we should have a balanced budget, which was an 88% issue. And people would say, oh yes, I am too. And I learned this lesson in a variety of ways. I'm not going to go into it today because of time, but there were years of my trying to understand, how do teams win? Whether it's the American Army, where I'm the longest serving teacher in the senior military, or it's studying the football coach in Carrollton, Georgia, who had the best record in the state of Georgia. And he had a simple model. The only person in Georgia who ran a single wing. He said nobody in high school could ever learn how to defend against a single wing in 1 week, and it gave all 11 people something to do. He said, if I get all 11 to do a little bit, they're going to beat a team that has to rely on a quarterback and an end. Now, this may seem obvious to you, but we designed the '94 campaign very directly and very simply. We then were faced with a greater challenge. No Republican had been reelected since 1928 as a majority. And in 1996, with a relatively weak Republican candidate against an incumbent Democratic president, we had to get reelected. It was the hardest single campaign we fought. And we went back and did the same thing. We designed a fight over Medicare. We trained our own team how to win the fight. We spent a year doing it. We kept AARP totally off balance and neutral. And the result was, for the first time since 1928, we got reelected. So the first thing we want to do is win the argument. I'll come back to that in a second. The second thing we want to do is flood the election with candidates. And I have a very simple direct injunction to all of you. There are 513,000 elected offices in the United States, from school board to city council to county commission to state legislature to governor to Congress to the presidency. Fill them all. If it's a district which you are absolutely 100% convinced no Republican can win, recruit a moderate Democrat. You can go out with a very simple model. We're going to define a secular socialist left wing. And I'm going to say to everybody, and this will get me in some trouble, I'm sure, on talk radio, but I'm going to say to everybody who's not for a secular socialist left wing, help us win an election. And let me give you this specific example. 64% of California voted against more taxes and more spending in May. 64%. Every congressional district voted no. Pelosi's district was 51% no. Now you have to ask yourself a tough question. Would you be willing to elect a Republican governor in California with 64%, knowing that you would have carried San Francisco? Or do you have to go figure out a way to go and infuriate San Francisco, so now you only win by 60? And then why don't we throw in a way to infuriate Los Angeles, so now you're down to 55? And then why don't we make sure that we really truly irritate Latinos, so now you're down to 49? This is going to be a real challenge for the conservative movement. You can govern as a center-right majority, and you can bring together an amazing range of people, and we can break Pelosi, and we can break Reid, and we can replace Obama, and he can be a one-term president exactly like Jimmy Carter, but it requires building a national majority. Or we can feel really good and really narrow and decide, boy, are we virtuous? I don't think if that happens, Pelosi is Speaker for life, and Obama will get reelected. I think it's that simple. So let's pick fights that are huge but fit conservative values. I mean, nobody's ever looked at the Contract with America and said it wasn't conservative. But it was all based on big fights on big themes. The third thing you have to do, which both Reagan and Thatcher, and to some extent myself, all three of us failed to do,